This episode is being brought to you in part by Real-Time CTMS, a leading provider of innovative software solutions for clinical trial research sites, site networks, sponsors, and CROs. To get a free demo, visit the company's website at realtime-ctms.com and complete one of their contact forms. Hello and welcome to the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. We're back after a week off. Forgive our absence, but occasionally have to do some actual work. Our guest this week is Zina Sarif. Zina is a cancer scientist and founder of Yendou. Yendou is on a mission to speed up clinical trial delivery from months to weeks and become a global community of principal investigators, patients, and sponsors. Yendou connects healthcare innovators with healthcare providers and make clinical trial access and delivery for all sides only a few clicks away. In this episode, we discuss Zina's journey from lab to clinical trials, the significance of site engagement, and the mounting inefficiencies that plague our industry. Without further ado, Zina Sarif. All right, Zina, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me here, Brad.
Good. Where are you located?
In Berlin, in Germany.
Nice. So I'm here in Oklahoma City. So you're what is that, like a good 6 or 7 hours ahead, probably?
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here. Are you starting your morning?
Yeah, I'm still waking up right now. So, well, I appreciate you taking up the end of your day here as the weekend approaches. And as I like to start pretty much with all of our guests, it's like to hear about people got into clinical research. I find, again, it's oftentimes sort of accidental entry. People get in and realize that they really love it. I think that can be instructive for other people outside the industry. So if you would, just kind of walk us through, how you came to clinical research.
Definitely. Well, in my case, it wasn't accidental at all. I'm a cancer scientist by profession. I studied chemistry. I specialized early on in cancer drug development. So I have been working more at early stage for the last 10 years using different strategies from like chemodrugs to immunotherapy and MAPK inhibitors and so on. In the last 10 years working in early drug development, I cannot remember a week where I have worked less than 60 hours. And 2 years ago, I remember I stumbled across a report by Gaurav, who is a McKinsey partner in the healthcare department. And the report was about how we could save 500 days from the clinical trial just by improving processes. And when you spend so many hours in the lab trying to find a good therapeutic, and you realize that actually we have more troubles because people are just messing up during the clinical trials and it's taking so long because of processes, I couldn't believe it. And to me, it was the first time that I realized it's not only efficacy and safety of drugs that are actually making it harder, challenging us in terms of curing cancer. It's more clinical trials, who takes 11 years in oncology, and all the processes around them. And that's when I decided I want to, literally after reading the report, it was a Wednesday, September in 2020, I checked on the internet and I saw that Parexel is offering a training, and I called them. They called me back the same day. On 2 days later, on Friday, I signed the contract and I joined on Monday.
Nice.
After. So that's how I joined actually clinical research. And after Parexel, when I joined AstraZeneca, and they were asking me, well, you have been working in a global role as an assistant of the director of oncology at Parexel, and now you are moving to CRA, which is a local role. She's like, you are basically downgrading yourself. Why would you do this? And I told them, I am here to understand why it's taking so long. And that's why I'm here. And so, yeah, they knew from the beginning, I'm not going to stay for long as a CRA, but basically I am here to understand what's going on. So maybe to make those 500 days goes away and shorten the clinical trial. So this is my journey to clinical research.
So that's really interesting. And I think admirable. And I think just a smart way to really, because I think you've alluded to, I think, and have probably noticed, is that there's so much sort of siloing, between all the different aspects that are involved in drug development. And to know, as a scientist, that has to be incredibly frustrating to know that like your work can be so further prolonged because of things well beyond your control, right? So
Yes.
it's sort of like the science versus the art of the clinical trial in a way. And it seems very much in my mind as two very different approaches, I guess. So that's really fascinating. Did you, as you sort of made the transition in the beginning, did you find that, I mean, first of all, was it difficult to sort of shift gears in that way? Did you find it a learning curve that was just different, or do you think it was pretty intuitive, just knowing what you already knew about the process?
Yes. When I joined clinical research, I remember, I think on the one hand, you move from being the expert in building drugs and searching for targets in the lab to having no idea what everyone is talking about. I remember I would go to those meetings, everyone is using abbreviations,
Right.
and I understand zero. And I would be literally spending my weekend reading the SOPs, reading the protocols. And on the one hand, it was really great because most of the drugs of the clinical trials I am currently leading at AstraZeneca, those were therapeutics I worked on in the lab. So I truly understand them. And for scientists, it's such a joy. My colleagues, they always joke, Zina is leaving their babies to the, it's like, I worked on those and now you can see them. It's beautiful.
You're watching them grow up.
Yes. And on the other hand, you have all those guidelines and they have no idea about. And it was like, what if I screw up? What if I did something wrong? It's like, what if I miss this SIA? What if I miss this report? And it's like all those things that were, literally challenging at the beginning. But yeah, I like learning, and I have always been extroverted in terms really loving talking to people I don't know. And to me, it was like having the opportunity to use my scientific background to really communicate the joy I have running those trials to the sites I'm working with. And yeah, but definitely challenging for the first 3 months.
Sure. Well, and I think that's, again, interesting and probably very unique viewpoint. I mean, I work at the site level. I have always worked at the site level. So, a lot of things like I have no idea what goes into the actual development on the front end. I don't know. I don't fully understand, mechanisms of action and all the different things that went into it. More the execution of the trial is where I'm focused. I'm curious. I mean, do you think that a more holistic understanding from like all the different stakeholders could potentially help drive change as well if everybody truly understood all the different players in the game? I mean, I feel like that's really lacking to a large degree.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I realize in the way because at AstraZeneca, I'm doing more feasibility and startup phase of the clinical trials, and not much monitoring. And I remember when I have those qualification visits and initiation visits with sites, they really enjoy it because it was always engaging. And sometimes they ask you, why do patients have to provide those samples? Like, what does it even why do we need those sequencing of those genes? And then you explain to them the process and they love it. And usually there is this concept of you explain the medical part to the physician, the principal investigators, and the administrative part, assessment schedule, to the study coordinators.
Right.
And I was always against it because to me, they spend more time with the clinical trial than the physicians themselves. And they want them to understand why actually are we comparing those two arms? And they do have those questions, but they never dare to ask them because they don't want to sound stupid. And I'm always having amazing conversations with them. And you see they come back, and then when they understand the clinical trial, of course, they are more engaged in it, and they will be, just like, call me, there is this patient, do you think it will work? And then just leveraging the quality of conversation we can have with sites beyond, you have to record those data on the EDC system, you have to do this, you have to do this. Just, I think if we communicate, it's just like you communicate on another level, which makes also the relationship with sites just to really improve it.
Well, and again, I think that does flow even further down to patients because, again, it's, as a coordinator, again, you do, like you say, you kind of fall into the trap of like, okay, what do I have to do?
Yeah.
But you're not always, if you don't go the extra mile to learn why, or some of the reasoning behind it, I think that can create challenges. If I have a patient saying, well, what are these labs that you're drawing and why are you drawing them? And as
Yes.
a coordinator, it doesn't build a lot of trust with your patient to say, oh, I don't know, protocol says to draw them. And instead I can say, well, this is, this particular drug is passed through the liver, so they're keeping an eye on liver enzymes, or, an example just simple like that. And then I think you gain some more credibility and trust with your patient. The patient's more engaged as well. All that stuff sort of trickles down. But I think, again, as you kind of point to, that's not really the paradigm as it is right now. It is the doctor gets the high level science, the coordinator gets just do this, just go do this stuff, and don't worry about why you're doing it. So I think it's a really, and to some degree, a lot of the CRAs aren't necessarily equipped to answer those questions or explain those things anyway. So again, I find that maybe a lost opportunity that's happening.
And yeah, to me, I like the idea of the clinical research liaison, someone who understands, it's like the same way companies have medical scientific liaisons to bring the data to the physicians. We have clinical research liaisons who literally their role is to communicate science in plain language to site staff, because that's how you get people engaged. That's how you get people to really, like, I have this amazing study which basically literally patients, they switch therapy based on their genetic mutation. And then you need to run a scientific conversation with your site staff to make them understand why would they switch the therapy. I mean, the therapy is apparently working. There is no progress. Why they will switch, and we are running toward personification, and genes plays a huge role in fighting disease, and we can't ignore this part anymore. And I think, yeah, and sites are super excited because when you make them understand that they are part of writing history of innovation in medicine, I think everyone is excited about it. Not like, oh, this is the protocol, please recruit patients, tell me how many patients you can recruit by then and then. Those, to me, those are low quality conversations.
Yeah, well, and I think unfortunately it's still very prevalent across most trials I see. I mean, again, a missed opportunity to include, I've talked to MSL, and a lot of times in MSL, I'm not a doctor, so they don't necessarily care about talking to me, right? But I may say, what are some, study opportunities? They hand me off to somebody on the research side, but there's never a sort of cohesive conversation around the bigger picture. Again, at least not with the research coordinator or the research site itself. So yeah, again, I feel like there's the pieces are there, but maybe we still haven't done a great job of just, bringing them all together in the right way so that we can be better engaged and do, a better job across the site level, because I think that's ultimately where the rubber hits the road, right? I mean, you have to get patients into trials through sites. So if sites aren't on board and equipped with the things that they need, then the studies are going to fail, and that's just the sad reality of it.
I like you know me, I am a huge advocate of site centricity. Usually I always say we need to be careful not to misunderstand what patient centricity means. And I see all the innovation happening in terms of telehealth, for example, and remote monitoring. And the question is always, what do we actually really want to achieve? And to me, our highest goal out of us is to bring great medicines to the patients as soon as possible. And I have to ask myself, is the innovation I am bringing fancy tech, or it's really serving the higher goal we all are here to serve? And if I talk to cancer patients, they tell me they want to see their physicians face to face. And and we know that in oncology, ads targeted patients recruitment doesn't work, because if you have a heavy diagnosis when it's about life and death, you don't want to take the decision which kind of therapy you are going to do. You do what your oncologist is telling you to do. So physicians and sites are our gate to patients recruitment. And serving patients, being patient-centric, is offering sites the best clinical trial experience possible so they can provide care to the patient. And to me, site centricity is how we express patient centricity in clinical trials. Yeah, and that's where the focus should be. And this is in terms of communications, in terms of digital tools we use to communicate with sites, to record data on sites. There are a lot of issues happening, and I think I don't know why it's really hard to, just like to take a moment, step back and ask ourselves, is what we are doing actually serving our mission, or are we just following the trend?
Right. And I think that's certainly an issue we feel at the site level. And I think I've, seen you talk about it some too. It's look, there's no reason to just have tech for the sake of having tech, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there are obviously great use cases and there are places where it makes perfect sense, but I don't know if it's just the time that we're in. I mean, I'm sure all too familiar with like the whole DCT movement, and it seems like what can we throw at patients or sites or whoever and see what sticks. And, that's fine. I think maybe that could help be instructive, but it still feels a little too like we're more concerned about the method than the thing we're trying to actually do. You know what I mean? Just because we have some fancy bells and whistles doesn't mean it has to get, inserted into everything.
And to me, DCT is bringing clinical trials everywhere where a need exists. And it doesn't mean to people's homes, because what we forget in our privileged societies, we are fine with having strangers home, but in most other cultures it's not the case. And clinical trials are not run only in Europe and US. So we have to ask ourselves, and like even talking to patients in Germany, for example, they tell me, well, I don't want my family to see me just being administered the treatment. I like the privacy I have on site. And again, what does DCT mean? And I would say, like, we spend a lot of money trying to find patients, but patients, it's really hard to find information available about enrolling clinical trials. And to me, this is DCT. Put the information out there.
Right.
And it's much cheaper than running targeted ads everywhere. Just like, do what we have to do. And I think, yes.
Yeah, well, and again, even I've considered that myself. I mean, I'm lucky enough I'm not a patient or anything, but I don't want strangers in my house. Yeah, I want to go. If I have a condition, I want to be, I want to see the doctor. I want to be on site. And again, that I understand and I do agree with the concept of having the option.
Yes.
Right. But I think it's just that it's an option. And I think people will be surprised to find that for most trials, and at least most phase 2 and 3 trials that, we participate in, that people are going to want to come on site. Yes. Even for the relationships that are built between the patients and the study staff. And I see that all the time. They're your friends. I mean, I know that's maybe not what you want to hear from an objective scientific perspective, but to some degree, that relationship building is the difference between someone staying in a study and engaging and retaining and not. And that's just how it is, for better or worse. And I feel like if you start putting technology between that relationship, it's not going to make it any better. It's only going to create more potential issues, I think.
Yeah. Like literally I got COVID at the beginning of 2020 and I was super sick. And it was like just before the first lockdown started in Germany and Europe. And of course I was scared. And then I had the opportunity to have a telehealth appointment, which I took for the first day. And then my situation worsened. And I called, I was like, I don't care. Make it possible. I want you to see me and tell me if I am okay or not.
Right.
And yes. And this is, again, I think it was bad, but it wasn't a heavy diagnosis compared to if I have a worse cardiovascular disease, or if I am diagnosed with cancer. And they have, like Stacey Herter, I got to know her. She's a huge advocate for cancer patients. She says she just wore full body protection and she goes to on-site because she wants her oncologist to see her. And
Sure.
it's just like, let's ask patients what they want. And then we can build the technologies needed. But at the end, to me, Our job is in clinical trials, in clinical research, is to bring cure to patients. And we should never forget that our job is to bring cure. And the question is, it takes us 11 years to do so. And this is not okay. It takes us 11 years, not because there are issues with the IPs, but because there are issues with the processes of the clinical trial. And we should fix this. And to me, can we get 11 years down to 7 years? Yes, we can. And without impacting anything around the regulatories. And that's what we should focus on first before thinking about the fancy tech we can build.
Well, yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's just so many, and we see them every day, so many ridiculous inefficiencies that exist that could be fixed with really no tech at all. just sort of zipping up some of those processes in smarter ways. And to me, that's a cheaper, more effective option, at least in the beginning. And then, then you can start to look for remaining gaps. So, I mean, let me ask you, so are you still with AZ now?
I am still with AZ till end of May.
And then are you working on a new project from there? Is that something that you can talk about? You've kind of teased a little bit.
Yeah, the idea of I have been working on feasibility and site selection for the last my year. I literally, at the end of this month, is going to be 1 year at AstraZeneca. What we know across the industry is, like, if you have a phase 3 clinical trial, you spend around 8 months, 4 months to 6 months running feasibility, and another 4 months. So, like, literally 8 months to 12 months in feasibility and site qualification selection. Like, the site selection process takes 1 year prior to the trial start. And across all pharmaceutical companies, the site's performance is around 30% in oncology. And then you have another 30% of sites that might recruit patients, but less than they promise to recruit. And you have 40% of sites that recruits 0 patients. At the same time, you have patients who do anything possible to be part of a clinical trial, and physicians who would love to be part of clinical research. And what we do is, once the clinical trial starts and we see that the trend is going down in terms of patients recruitment, everyone is panicking. And then the question is, can we run any ads or whatever to get patients in? And the question is always, could you call the sites and ask them why they haven't recruited the patients? And I'm like, why? How many patients can they recruit in this month? And to me, this is crazy. I mean, like, it's not like they know how many patients they're going to recruit per month. So it's like, why are we asking those questions? And those questions are actually the problem itself, because we blame the sites for us doing a bad job in selecting the right sites. And the question should be, why did we pick low-performing sites, and not why the site is not performing? And at AstraZeneca, I have been really successful recruiting non-experienced principal investigators, and they have been performing way better than our key opinion leaders.
Well, and so, and my business model is the same. We try to partner with physicians who maybe don't have infrastructure to perform or participate in trials, but just like you said, those are the places to go, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, to go back to what you said before, it's insane that it takes that long to get through feasibility for sites, especially when these companies have been working with the same sites.
Exactly.
They already know everything there is to know about the site. So
yeah, but you still ask the sites every time again and again the same questions, because the business model is every study has its own teams, and teams do not collaborate with each other. And again, literally, I talk with people at Novartis, Sanofi, Parexel, Ikevia, they all run the same process, and they can understand, because CROs, they make money, but per billable hour. And what I tell people in pharmaceutical companies, we are adopting the CEO model, which is actually not made to serve us. It's a model to make money.
Right.
So longer clinical trials, more billable hours, that's the business of CROs. So we have to hold on and ask ourselves, why are we running feasibility for the same site multiple times per year per study? Why do we need a qualification process after the feasibility process? And why don't we have a site acquisition department? Because if your portfolio is increasing, you are oversaturating your sites. And now you not only have external competition, now you have in-house competition. Like literally you have, it's like the number of clinical trials per year, they are going exponential in the last 10 years. And this year is going to be, last year was 37,000 new trials started. This year surely it's going to be more than 40K. And we have to solve this issue. And the only way to solve it, as long as physicians are treating patients and only physicians can enroll patients in clinical trials, is to ask yourself, we have to work on our site network. And that's the reason why I actually quit my job at AstraZeneca, because to me, it was like the only way. First, we don't need 1 year to select sites. The NIHR, they were doing an amazing job, just like the National Institute of Health Research in the UK. And there, the government understood with Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine the importance of clinical trials. So they built these institutions funded by 3 billion, and their sole job is to accelerate clinical trials delivery, feasibility, and patients recruitment. And the data are amazing. Site selection in 15 days.
Nice.
Patients recruitment 6 times faster than we do. And to me, this is a business model you can scale up globally. We have a case study, like a whole country as a case study. And that's actually what I left, like working with people from NIHR to implement similar system using technology, because the NIHR, they still use human resources to really keep the science network alive and just like to run communications. And I believe, the same way, if I want to book a taxi, I go to Uber. If I want to listen to a podcast, I have my go-to place, like I go to Spotify or iTunes, or the same if you wanted to purchase something, you go to Amazon. But where would you go if you are looking for a clinical trial?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's where I want to go. I just want to, like physicians says, we want a brand independent place where we can go and see data and we can make our mind about if we want to participate or not. And I think, this is the space I'm planning to build a platform where everyone has access to all clinical trials out there and facilitate site selection and use data to also to provide more. I think more important than sites ranking is disease burden per geographic area, because this tells us where we should go. And again, when we talk about decentralized clinical trials in phase 2 and phase 3, what I say is clinical trials are decentralized by design. We have them in all countries. The question is, we need smarter decentralization. We have to know where to go. And also, if you want to have a referral system, I talk to physicians. I was like, would you refer a patient? And physicians would refer their patients for dollar number. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't be naive. And if our goal is, and still it's cheaper than if you hire a recruitment company to run ads for you. So we shouldn't be naive. We should build a system that reward clinical trial participation.
Yes.
Like make it accessible, reward it, make it faster. Because I think if we get site selection done right and fast, we get patient recruitment done right and fast, and then we can go down from 11 to 7 years.
Right. And I think, I love what you're saying. I think if you layer DCT technologies onto a system that already doesn't work well, you're going to get maybe, some incremental improvement, but I don't think it's going to really move the needle. And that's where I think of course, this is a little self-serving for me to say, but I really think that the future is a combination of these DCT technology and continued movement into community partnerships. Like you say, if we can identify a geography that's, high with particular disease burden, but underserved in terms of clinical trials, we can mobilize, we don't have to, go nuts with too many boots on the ground, but a combination of some human support and in conjunction with DCT technology. And then I think you can really start to make big strides towards increasing, the efficiency and speed in which we work. And I don't feel like I've heard those two things sort of really talked about in conjunction with each other. But it sounds like that's kind of what you're alluding to, at least, maybe not directly, but in a sort of roundabout way. I mean, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Having the community network, because I believe this is very important, and using data on disease burden, using data on, yeah, and like having both those to build a smarter allocation, and also changing the way site engagement is. Because for me at the moment it's really hierarchical and authoritarian in a way that as a pharmaceutical company, when you have a clinical trial, then you contact your portfolio of principal investigators and tell them, hey, I have this trial. Go and fill the survey so I can decide if you can be part of it or not. And and I think clinical trials are human rights. If I am a patient, I want to know about every possibility therapeutic option I do have, including clinical trials. And it's our responsibility to make those informations accessible to every physician so they can inform their patients. And to me, it's like put them out there and let everyone, like the one who are interested, and they will contact you and tell you, let me be part of this. And if you can only hire 700 sites globally, then build a referral program. So how can you engage those physicians even in the clinical trial, even though you are not contracting them as a principal investigator? And those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. And I think it's our responsibility to put the information out there, to let everyone in, physicians and patients. And yeah, and what I'm missing is platforms that actually invite everyone to have a conversation and an interaction. And I think if we, yeah, just like if we offer a platform where everyone can access the informations, can request participation in a clinical trial, getting people engaged, getting sites engaged with each other to understand the burden of the clinical trial design. Maybe we need less amendments if we have everyone in the room. To me, that's the technology we need more than building an additional, just like existing platforms, just trying to build incremental innovation in terms mine is maybe has this additional feature and so on. There's still a lot that needs to be done.
So, yeah, and I think you touched on something that's it's been perplexing to me, and I think something that needs to be better addressed is how to build these referral networks. I mean, I think that's still, I mean, I could be wrong. Again, I have a sort of myopic viewpoint, in doing what I do, but just again, like you alluded to, if I go down the street and talk to the doctor and say, hey, you're not in our trial, but we'd love you to refer your patients to us. And they're going to say, well, why would I do that? We all love to believe in altruism, and there's certainly a good deal of altruistic physicians and providers out there, no question about it. But how do we truly incentivize participation for maybe sites? Well, I say sites, but for practices or hospitals or medical groups that aren't traditional research sites, because we can't go paying for referrals, but there's got to be some better method or technique in order to do that. And I find that challenging in building out, my own network. And I don't know that I've seen anybody really crack that code quite yet. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, to me, on the one hand, I think that's why it's really important to have community networks and you have a fair distribution of the clinical trial. Because, like, if I always pick the one, so it's wrong to expect physicians to refer their patients for no money.
Sure.
Because that's how they earn their living.
Right.
And when I talk to them, they tell me, look, Zina, that's how much money I make per patient. And if I refer all my patients to this physician who is already having a financial incentive through participation in clinical trial, I will end up with nothing.
Right. I'm taking food out of my mouth.
Yes. And then again, so like instead of going to the same clinic in a 1 mile region, why not switch the clinics? Why not build communities where you have a fair distribution? It's like I have 5 clinical trials. Each one is for a clinical trial. And that's how everyone is part of and it's our responsibility to do so. And then again, there are sites who says, I am happy to refer my patient for this number. Yeah, we need to look for, then we have to make new contracts to incentivize those kind of referrals too.
I agree perfectly with you on both points. I think the one is a great point, and something that, again, I've looked at doing is, again, you can have whatever your radius is, but rotate those sites and create a true network, not really that one person or one site is benefiting, way more than everyone else, and the rest are just sort of feeding in and barely moving the needle for them. I mean, spread around the love in a way. And the other one is, I do think there needs to be a clear path for compensation or incentivization for those referring physicians. And again, maybe there is. It's something that I feel like I've asked a lot of people about and never gotten a clear answer about how to structure that in a way that's going to be universally acceptable. Because I think sites especially are very, very scared of running afoul and doing anything that may be considered, unethical or otherwise might get us in trouble. So I'm with you. I think these are the truly practical conversations we need to be having, and not how can we reinvent the e-diary. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's where I'm with you 100%.
Totally. Because to me is, let's ask them. I really love, I call my physicians principal investigators and tell them, why do you participate in this clinical trial? We should stop telling people what they are supposed to do and start asking them what they want. What is their motivation? Because, it's amazing. I don't have to pay for this information. I just sit there and keep asking and ask me, explain to me what's going on in you. And then there is a certain dynamic going there in the way, because they also make plans around participating in clinical trials. And I believe, again, around sites are worrying if doing anything unethical. This is why you need clinical scientific communication. Like, if you explain to those sites that how those clinical trials might serve their patients, that their patients will only participate in the clinical trials if they are eligible and they are fit, and they will be, and just like kind of reward system. Everything is ethical about it, but we need to have an open conversation. We don't need a lot of secrecy around the clinical trial. Only physicians who participate in are allowed to have access to all information. I think if we get everyone in, everyone will win.
Well, yeah, I think, again, that's a great point in terms of asking these guys why. Because why do they participate? Because I think you find, a few different answers, but I also think we need to consider those motivations and then adjust appropriately to further incentivize those motivations. Right now, obviously within some limits, but let's be honest, there are some guys who do it for the money. Right. Yeah. That's fine. Let's not kid ourselves. Now, that does not mean that they can't have great PI oversight and they want to take great care of their patients. Those two things can happen in parallel with each other. There are doctors who do it for some prestige or to get their names out there. There are doctors who do it to truly have access to the newest treatments. There are some that do it, again, for altruistic reasons. So how can we lean into those different motivations to make it more attractive to those physicians or physicians who are otherwise not participating but still have those motivations? And again, I think that's something that's, I don't want to say it's taboo to say well, hey, look, some guys do this for money, and that's a part of their motivation. And again, that doesn't preclude them from being good investigators, right?
Honestly, we all want to have a great impact in this world and do well. I work here with the goal to really speed up innovation in cancer research, but at the same time, I expect the company I'm working for to pay me well. So I don't worry about my financial existence. I can really focus on my impact.
Right.
We shouldn't be, why would I expect someone else to act differently? We shouldn't be naive, or this is not even naive. We should be just realistic on how the world works. And even in terms of Maslow's hierarchies of needs, you need to secure yourself, to care for yourself before being able to care for others.
Right.
Some can do both at the same time, but we shouldn't mistake outliers for the rule.
Yeah, no, I again, I could not agree more. I want to shift gears a little bit here, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
I like to ask all of our guests, and again, I find it useful to people to kind of share what are maybe some tools or resources that you use to kind of, help you throughout your career, whether it be a, app or a book or a process, or maybe what's something you'd share that really helps you, be the best you can be.
I think books. I love biographies. I believe no problem is a new problem. Everything happened in the history before, and people had solution to it, and kind of history repeats itself. I believe that innovation is at the intersection of ideas. It's never, so I try not to be an expert. I try to be a generalist, to always learn things I don't know. And I think that's whatever ideas I have, or if I'm quick in my thinking, is just because I love understanding how technology has been able to disrupt the financial market, which is a highly regulated and conservative industry, the same way healthcare is. So I am fascinating with just like understanding the financial market and all what's happened to disrupt the same. Yeah, and you're just like, I call it thinking outside of the box, that the solutions to solve clinical research, I won't find them within clinical research because we are still struggling. I have to see what's happening elsewhere. And so yeah, I love reading books on industries and biographies of people who challenge the status quo in different industries and then have been able to make the change. I think that's what makes me resilient and hopeful, and having this certitude that we can make it happen in healthcare too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there seems like a lot we can learn from other industries and things that maybe we haven't yet taken advantage of, that others have already forged a path. That does occur to me fairly often.
But I would like to ask you the same question though.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm a big reader for sure. I tend to read more. I like philosophy a lot, so I read a lot of philosophy, especially like the ancient Stoics. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. And then, also just some more like generic stuff like meditation and exercise and things like that. Also task management, man. I like Todoist. I try to be my problem for me is I'm a big picture person. I struggle with details. So I have to really instill discipline in myself to detail very, very finely. And between using task management and I've gotten into like bullet journaling, which makes me get stuff out of my head and onto paper so that I can, be more efficient with process again, because that's where I struggle. So yeah, those are kinds of my,
Look what I have here. I don't know if you can see it. Meditation.
Oh yeah. Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, no, meditations is awesome.
And one of my journals is my daily journal is the Daily Stoic Journal by Ryan Holiday. So you have a philosophical question every morning and every evening that you can reflect on, and I really love it.
Meditations is a must-have, and I'm a big fan of that, and Epictetus and his works as well.
Yeah.
So I love that. Nice. That's a nice thing to find in common. Well, very cool. I really want to thank you for coming on. This has been one of my favorite conversations, I think, because I think so often we lack practical conversations in the field. I sit in on a lot of webinars and listen in. I listen to a lot of sponsor level, vendor level people talk, but I feel like we speak in these sort of esoteric terms, and a lot of times it lacks practical, how are we going to do this stuff? Let's actually get down to it. And that's very frustrating, especially when you're the person on the ground seeing the patient executing the protocol,
Yeah.
I think that can be sometimes, can beat you down at times. So I love being able to have, again, truly practical conversations. Like, how can we fix these processes rather than what kind of cool platform can we, throw on top, or how can we do more things remotely? Well, that doesn't really help me, like
Yes.
we have a lot more real problems to solve. So you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up here?
No, thank you. That's it. I also really enjoyed the conversation. And I think to me, this is the reason even why I would say principal investigator instead of PI. I do my best to not use abbreviation, to use, I'm the practical person. I worked in a lab. It has always been about you have to build to make the drug and to see the results. So don't talk to me. Yeah, just like it's all about what are you doing to take it from the hypothesis to a real product.
Right. Where can people reach out to you online?
On LinkedIn, LinkedIn is my platform. Yes, just Zinas Sarif. I'm there.
All right. I'll make sure that we put that in our show notes. And again, I want to thank you so much for coming on, and I'd love to have you come back on. I think there's still a lot of, especially as you progress through your journey, I think there's probably a lot more to unpack. So again, thanks, Zina.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Brett, for having me here. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
As always, thanks so much for listening to Note to File Podcast. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for episode transcripts, show notes, and links to our guests' contact info. Thanks again.